The first sound that reached me that night wasn't the wind. It was the whimper of something dying. The forest was a living thing in winter, howling, cracking, whispering secrets between the trees. But that sound, it didn't belong. It wasn't a branch groaning under ice or an animal's call. It was pain, raw and alive, threading through the storm like a plea. I froze halfway through stacking firewood beside my cabin, my hands shaking around the axe handle. Snow fell in thick, silent sheets, swallowing the world in white. My breath came out in ghosts, rising into the dark like prayers that would never be answered. Then it came again. A weak, broken howl, my heart stuttered. A wolf, a dying wolf. I told myself to go inside, to shut the door, lock the bolt, pretend I'd heard nothing, because out here, on the edge of the northern ridge, banished from the safety of the pack's walls, mercy could get you killed. But something in me couldn't turn away. Maybe it was the part that still remembered what it felt like to be left bleeding in the snow. I grabbed my lantern, wrapping my old fur cloak around my shoulders, and stepped into the storm. The snow swallowed my boots as I trudged toward the sound. The wind clawed at my face, biting through layers, dragging at my breath. I could barely see beyond the trembling halo of my lantern. The forest stretched endlessly, white and black, silence and storm, until I saw it. A trail. Dark streaks cutting through the snow. Blood. My stomach twisted. The scent hit next, iron and wet fur, the unmistakable tang of a wolf bleeding out. I followed it. My heart thudded against my ribs, each step heavier, my instincts screaming that I was walking into danger, but I couldn't stop. The blood trail led to a hollow near the frozen creek, half sheltered by fallen pine boughs. And there he was, a massive black wolf, sprawled on his side, his breath coming in shallow, ragged bursts. His fur was matted with frost and blood, one of his legs twisted unnaturally. Even half dead, he was terrifying. Muscle and power coiled under that dark pelt, the kind of beast you only ever saw leading a pack. But there was no pack here. Only him. Hey, my voice trembled. You're going to freeze to death out here. His eyes flicked open, golden, burning through the snowstorm. The kind of eyes that could stop your heartbeat. For a heartbeat, I thought he'd lunge, but he didn't move. He just stared at me. Then his head dropped to the snow. I don't know what possessed me next. Maybe pity, maybe madness, maybe something older, wilder, something that whispered help him. I dropped my lantern beside him and slid my arms under his heavy body. The cold burned through my gloves. His fur was soaked, his body ice cold. "You're too heavy, you bastard," I muttered under my breath, teeth chattering. "Don't you dare die before I get you inside." It took everything I had to drag him back to the cabin, half lifting, half crawling through snow that came up to my knees. My muscles screamed. My breath tore out of me in clouds. By the time I reached the door, my vision had started to blur from exhaustion. But I got him inside. The cabin was small, barely big enough for me. But I shoved the table aside and spread an old blanket near the fire. The heat hadn't reached its full glow yet. It licked weakly at the cold air. The wolf lay there, unmoving. His side rose and fell shallowly, his fur slick with melting snow and blood. I hesitated for a moment, staring at him. "If you wake up and try to eat me, I'll regret this," I whispered. He didn't move. So I did what I knew. What I'd learned in the healer's hut before I'd been cast out. I found my knife, cut through the blood-matted fur, and started cleaning the wound. The gash was deep, probably from a blade, not another wolf. The cut was too clean, too cruel. I worked silently, my hands steady even though my heart raced. I stitched the wound with trembling fingers, wiped the blood away, and whispered to myself to keep from shaking. When I finished, I sat back, exhausted, staring at him as he lay there, massive and broken and far too beautiful for something that could kill me with one bite. "Who hurt you?" I murmured. "And why are you alone?" The storm raged outside, rattling the windows. Inside, only the fire's low crackle and the sound of his shallow breaths filled the silence. I wrapped myself in a blanket and sat on the floor near the fire, watching him. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe I was lonelier than I'd ever admitted. but for the first time in months, I didn't feel completely alone. When I woke, it was to a low growl. The fire had died down to embers, painting the room in flickering orange. The wolf's eyes were open now, sharp and alive. He bared his teeth, muscles coiling like a shadow about to spring. "Easy," I said softly, raising my hands. "You're safe." He growled again, pushing himself upright with effort. His body trembled, but there was power in his gaze, an ancient, predatory awareness that made my pulse skip. "You were dying," I said, voice barely above a whisper. "I helped you." His head tilted slightly, golden eyes narrowing. Then slowly, painfully, he shifted. My breath caught in my throat as bones cracked and fur receded. His form rippled, shrinking, reshaping until a man lay before the fire, naked, wounded, breathtaking. He was tall, his body a map of scars and muscle, his skin pale from blood loss. His hair, dark as ink, fell across his forehead, and his eyes, the same golden fire, watching me with something unreadable. My throat went dry. I grabbed the nearest blanket and threw it toward him. "Cover yourself," I stammered. He caught it one-handed, never breaking eye contact. Then, in a low, rough voice that sounded like it had been dragged across gravel, he said, "You shouldn't have done that." "Done what?" "Saved me." The way he said it, like a threat, like a curse, made my heart pound. He looked around the cabin, taking in the small space, the fire, the dried herbs hanging above the stove. Then his eyes came back to me. "What are you doing out here alone, Omega?" The word hit me like a slap. Omega. I hadn't heard anyone call me that since my banishment. "I could ask you the same," I said, forcing my voice steady. "You were bleeding out in the snow." Something flickered in his expression, something dark and dangerous. "You don't understand what you've done," he muttered. I folded my arms. "You're welcome." That earned me a half laugh, low and bitter. He winced as pain shot through his side. "Who did this to you?" I asked quietly. He didn't answer. His gaze dropped to the fire, the light catching the jagged scar along his collarbone. "Fine," I said, sighing. "Don't tell me. Just don't move too much. You'll tear the stitches." His eyes snapped back to me, sharp as blades. "You stitched me?" "Yes, you're lucky I learned how before—" I stopped myself before finishing the sentence. Before meant anything more. His gaze softened for a heartbeat. "You shouldn't waste your kindness on monsters," he said. "I've already met monsters," I whispered. "You don't look like one." He turned away, jaw tight. Looks deceive. For the rest of the night, he drifted in and out of sleep. I tended the fire, keeping watch. Every now and then, I caught him murmuring in his dreams. Names I didn't know. Words that sounded like prayers or regrets. When dawn broke, the storm had passed. The world outside was silent, wrapped in white peace. Inside, the man was still asleep, his chest rising and falling steady now. I sat beside the window, letting the weak light spill over the floor. For the first time in months, my cabin didn't feel empty. And for reasons I couldn't explain, I felt safer with a stranger, a wounded, cursed stranger, than I'd ever felt among my own kind. It was 3 days before he spoke again. 3 days of silence and half-healed wounds. I fed him broth, cleaned his bandages, ignored his sharp stares. He moved carefully, his body healing faster than it should have. On the third night, as snow began to fall again, he broke the quiet. "Why are you out here, Omega?" I hesitated. "Because my pack doesn't want me. Why?" "Because I was born wrong," he frowned. "Wrong?" I looked away. Too weak to fight, too stubborn to obey, too different to belong. For a moment, the silence between us stretched, heavy with unspoken things. Then he said, "They were fools." I laughed softly. "You don't even know me." "I know strength when I see it," he said. His voice had changed, lower, quieter, almost gentle. Before I could answer, a sound outside froze us both. A distant howl, deep, commanding, not from any rogue. His eyes widened, and every muscle in his body went tense. "What is it?" I whispered. He turned toward the door, golden eyes hard as steel. "The king," he said. I frowned. "The king?" He met my gaze. "The Alpha King. He's come for me." The air in the cabin seemed to vanish. The fire flickered low, and in that silence, my heart began to hammer, not from fear of who was outside, but from what I saw in the stranger's eyes. Not fear. Not guilt. Something else. Regret. And that was the moment I knew. Whatever I had done by saving him was about to change everything. When I opened my eyes, dawn had barely touched the horizon. But the world outside my window no longer felt the same. The silence was wrong. Too heavy, too aware. The kind of silence that meant predators were near. I turned toward the bed, toward him. The man I'd dragged in from the snow 3 nights ago was already awake, sitting against the wall, golden eyes fixed on the door like he could see something I couldn't. His body had healed faster than should have been possible. The bruises were fading. The wound I'd stitched was almost sealed. He looked less like a man recovering from death, and more like a weapon waiting to be unsheathed. He didn't look at me when he spoke. "They're close," my heart stuttered. "Who?" He didn't answer, but I already knew. The way his body tensed. The way his nostrils flared at the faintest hint of scent in the air. Wolves. I walked to the window. Snow fell in slow, delicate spirals now, soft and deceptively peaceful. But deep between the trees I caught movement. Shadows. Armor. The royal guard. I felt my blood go cold. The Alpha King's soldiers never came this far north unless they were hunting something. Or someone. I turned back to the man. He was already standing, the blanket slipping from his shoulders, revealing the scars that mapped his back like broken constellations. "Tell me what's going on," I whispered. He looked at me finally. Really looked. "You saved the wrong wolf." We didn't speak for a while after that. He moved to the fireplace, throwing on his torn shirt, and crouched low beside the dying embers. His movements were silent, controlled, predatory. I could feel my pulse hammering against my skin. "If you're being hunted, you need to leave." He didn't even glance at me. "If I leave, they'll find you instead." "What?" "You sheltered a fugitive of the crown." He said it like a confession, low and steady. "If they smell me here, they'll burn this place to the ground, with you in it." My stomach dropped. "What did you do?" He stared into the fire. The flicker lit his face in golden shadow. "I bled for a king who lost his soul. That's my crime." I took a shaky breath. "So you're a traitor?" He turned, eyes sharp. "I'm a brother." The words hit the air like an unspoken curse. My mind tried to piece it together. The golden eyes, the strength, the arrogance in his tone. No, it couldn't be. But before I could ask, he moved, swift as the storm that had nearly killed him, and gripped my wrist. Not harshly, but enough that I felt the heat of his skin, the faint tremor of restraint beneath it. "If I tell you who I am," he said quietly, "you'll wish you'd let me die in the snow." Hours passed. The guards didn't approach the cabin, at least not yet. Their howls echoed distantly, circling the ridge. Searching. I tried to act normal. I stirred stew, fed the fire, kept busy, even though my hands shook too much to hold the spoon steady. He watched me from the shadows, eyes following every movement. There was something unreadable in his gaze. Guilt, maybe. Or warning. Finally, I said, "You could have left while I slept." He leaned back against the wall, a ghost of a smirk tugging at his lips. "And waste the only good thing I've found in months?" I looked up, startled. He didn't mean it kindly. There was bitterness there, a sadness so deep it looked like a wound. "You're not making sense," I said. "Neither does fate," he muttered. That night I couldn't sleep. The air inside the cabin had grown tight, like it shared his tension. Every sound outside, the creak of branches, the crunch of snow, felt magnified, dangerous. I sat by the window, eyes fixed on the dark tree line. And for the first time, I spoke the thought that had been gnawing at me. Are you really his brother? Silence. Then a slow inhale. Yes. The fire crackled softly between us. The Alpha King? I asked. You're his brother? He didn't look at me. The one who should have been dead years ago. I turned toward him, the words catching in my throat. They said the king's brother was executed for treason. That's what they needed you to believe. He stood then, walking closer until the firelight carved his face in gold and shadow. I saw the truth in his eyes, pain, defiance, a loneliness so vast it nearly broke something inside me. I was loyal once, he said. Until loyalty meant slaughtering the innocent to protect the guilty. His voice dropped lower. I wouldn't do it, so my brother called it betrayal. My chest tightened. The king hunts you. He smiled bitterly. The king hunts everything he can't control. For a long time we didn't speak. The storm outside grew fiercer again, wind clawing at the shutters. Then suddenly, he tensed. They've found us. Before I could ask. He was already moving, snatching his cloak, loading a blade I hadn't even seen hidden under the bed. His movements were sharp, trained, terrifyingly precise. I rushed to the window. Dark figures moved between the trees, their armor gleaming faintly in the moonlight. What do we do? I whispered. He glanced at me, eyes blazing gold. You hide. You'll tell them you never saw me. No. He was already at the door. Don't argue. If they sent me here, you're dead too. Then I'm already dead, I said, my voice shaking. You're not leaving me here. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, something raw, protective, dangerous. You don't know what you're saying. I know you wouldn't have survived the storm without me, I said. Don't waste that by being stupidly noble. He stared at me for a long time. Then, to my shock, he laughed softly. The sound was low, rough, and sad. Stupidly noble, he repeated, shaking his head. You sound like her. Like who? He didn't answer. Outside, a howl split the night, closer. Then another, louder, commanding. The kind that made the air itself bend. The Alpha King's call. The door rattled under the force of the wind. And then, 3 heavy knocks shook the wood. Every muscle in my body went rigid. The man, no. The wolf, grabbed my wrist and pulled me toward the back wall. There was a loose panel I'd never noticed before. He ripped it open, revealing a narrow crawl space behind the wood. Stay here, he ordered. What about you? He gave me a look that silenced any protest. You saved me once. Don't do it again. Before I could respond, he pushed me inside and closed the panel. Darkness swallowed me whole. I could barely breathe. The air smelled of wood and dust. I pressed my ear against the crack, heart pounding loud enough to drown out everything else. Then the door creaked open. Footsteps, heavy, confident. Voices, deep, commanding, and one that froze my blood completely, the Alpha King. Even without seeing him, I felt his presence. It was like the air itself bent to his will. Search the place, his voice rumbled. Smooth, cold, dangerous. He's here. I can smell him. I bit my lip to keep from making a sound. Wood splintered as soldiers tore through the cabin. The clang of steel, the crash of furniture. My heart felt like it would tear out of my chest. Then silence. And a single low growl that vibrated through the floorboards. Brother. The word rolled like thunder. My breath caught. I pressed closer to the crack, barely able to see through it. But I saw enough. 2 men facing each other in the flicker of firelight. One wearing the dark crest of the crown, the other, the wounded wolf I'd saved. Both identical in the eyes that burned gold. You should have stayed dead, the king said. And you should have stayed human, his brother replied. The air snapped with power. The sound that followed wasn't human. It was primal, echoing through every bone in my body. The clash of wolves that once shared blood, but now shared only hatred. The king struck first. His hand shot forward, slamming his brother into the wall. I heard the crack of wood, the hiss of pain. You betrayed me, the king snarled. I defied you, the other growled back. There's a difference. You endangered the crown. You destroyed everything it once meant." The fire flared wildly between them, throwing sparks into the air. 3 days, the king said, his voice low, dangerous. 3 days since you vanished. Do you think I wouldn't find you? You're my blood. Not anymore. Silence fell. And in that silence, I felt something shift. A scent, faint but powerful, drifted through the cracks. The king turned suddenly, eyes narrowing. He'd caught it too. My scent. He took a step toward the back wall, and every part of me froze. My pulse pounded in my ears. I could feel the heat of his power seeping through the wood. Then before he could reach me, his brother spoke. "She's innocent," he said quickly. The king stopped. She found me dying in the snow. She doesn't know who I am." The king's voice was colder than the storm outside. "Then she's already seen too much." My throat tightened. And that was the moment something inside me broke. Fear, reason, survival, all of it burned away. I kicked the panel open. The king's head snapped toward me. For a moment our eyes met, gold and wide and startled. The air between us pulsed, sharp as lightning. I didn't know what it was. Magic? Fate or something darker. But the second his gaze met mine, the world seemed to hold its breath. He inhaled once, deep, and his expression changed completely. The growl died in his throat. His eyes widened, not in rage, but in recognition. The room spun around me. The fire dimmed. The wind outside howled as if the forest itself felt it too. Because the Alpha King had just scented something impossible. Something forbidden. Something that should not exist. His mate. I didn't mean to move. My body decided for me, kicking the panel wide, dragging daylight into a room that had already chosen its shadows. The Alpha King's gaze hit me like winter itself, and for a heartbeat, I forgot how to breathe. Gold. Not the warmth of autumn wheat. No. The gold of a blade's edge in snowlight. Cold, merciless burning. He inhaled once and I felt it, like the pull of the moon on the tide, ancient and relentless. It dragged something inside me to the surface, something I'd spent my life tamping down so I could survive. The room swam. The fire trembled. "No," he said, so softly I almost didn't hear it. A denial, a prayer, a failure. His brother, my battered, almost dead wolf, shifted, placing himself between us like a living wall. "Don't," he warned. The king didn't even glance at him. "Get out of my way." "I won't." For a breath, nothing moved. Then a gust pried the door wider and snow dusted the floorboards, catching on the edge of my bare feet. I realized I was still crouched in the crawl space and straightened. My knees shook. The king's eyes dropped to where my fingers clutched the frame. Raw, splintered, bleeding, and his jaw tightened as if that pain belonged to him. He stepped once, and the cabin felt smaller. "Don't come closer," I whispered. His nostrils flared. Something like agony flickered across his face and was gone. "You ran into danger to protect him." The king's voice was iron. "Why?" I stared at his brother, at the shadowed eyes that had watched me sleep, and the mouth that had said I shouldn't have saved him, because he was dying. The king's gaze snapped to his brother. "You let her risk herself for you?" "She didn't let me," I shot back, heat rising to my face. "I chose it." The king's attention returned to me in a slow, devastating sweep. I felt seen in ways that were not kind. The frayed sleeve, the stubborn set of my mouth, the thinly veiled tremor in my throat. His eyes softened. Just there. Just once. Like pity was trying to find a foothold in a man who didn't believe in it. "Soldiers," the brother said sharply, head tilted toward the trees. He didn't come alone. I turned. Beyond the doorway, dark shapes moved between pines, the glint of metal like dull stars. The king flicked 2 fingers and the shapes froze, then melted further back, obedience like tidewater. A single motion and the world rearranged itself. "Call them off," I said before I could stop myself. He considered me the way storms consider roofs. "You command a king?" "Not a king," I said. My voice was too steady. "A man." For a heartbeat, silence cracked open. The fire sighed. Snow hissed in the wind. "Leave us," the king said at last, still staring at me, but speaking to the soldiers beyond the trees. The forest breathed out. The shadows retreated. His brother didn't. He shifted, a half-step, like he expected a blade. "You're not alone with her." A low sound rippled through the king's chest. Not quite laughter, not yet rage. "I'm never alone." He lifted his chin toward me. "Come away from the wall." I should have said no. Instead, I obeyed. I slid one foot forward, then the other, until the panel was at my back, and the fire warmed my shins, and I stood within reach of a man who ruled by fear and found me by scent. He was larger than his brother in some quiet way that wasn't muscle. It was gravity, the kind that bends light, black hair combed back with the efficiency of war, a dark crest at his breastbone, stitched with a hand that understood more than fashion. It understood banners, dirges, coronations. A thin silver scar cut through his right eyebrow. It should have marred him. It crowned him instead. "What's your name?" he asked. The question felt private in his mouth. Intimate. Dangerous. I thought of the countless times a name had been used like a leash and swallowed. "Tell me," he said, softer. "Rowan," I said. It left me like fog, and somehow he caught it. His eyes moved over my face, brow, cheek, mouth, as if he could taste letters on skin. "Rowan." He closed his eyes. "Saints, no. Don't do this," his brother said, voice rough. "She doesn't know." The king's eyes opened. "She knows what I am." "She doesn't know what she is," I flinched. "What I am," I repeated, blood cooling. "I'm an Omega." His mouth twitched, something like a smile if smiles could bleed. "You're mine." Those words didn't enter the room. They took it. Air thinned. The world shivered on new axis. Every part of me I'd taught to be small threw itself against bone, frantic, disbelieving. It wasn't a compliment. It wasn't a vow. It was a law of the body older than both of us. "No." My voice scraped. "I don't belong to anyone." "Tell fate," he said. "Tell me how," I demanded. He stared at me like I'd set fire to the snow. If I knew Rowan, I would have taught myself first. The way he said my name, it cracked something open. Some old bone sealed wrong. Heat climbed my throat. I hated him for that heat. I hated myself more. The brother took another small step, enough to put his shoulder between us again. "You can drag me back to your throne room and put a blade at my throat," he told the king. "But if you touch her—" The king did not look at him. "You'll what?" "Betray me again. You already chose your hill to die on. I chose not to slaughter the unarmed under your banner. Under our banner." The king's voice sharpened. "The crown doesn't ask. It ensures." "And what did it ensure?" The brother snapped. "Empty villages? Graves with no names? Don't sanctify your fear with ceremony." "Enough," I said. It didn't sound powerful. It sounded tired and human and full of every winter I had survived. And somehow both men fell silent. I drew a breath that felt like a bruise. "You brought soldiers into my woods. You tore through my home. You say things I don't understand and expect me to bow to them." "No," I faced the king. "If you came for him, then take him and go." He finally looked away from me, to the stitched wound at his brother's ribs, to the dried blood I'd scrubbed from the floorboards, to the broth bowl by the hearth. Something strange passed through his eyes. Not gratitude, not remorse. Recognition, a map of how kindness marks a place. "You sheltered a threat to my crown," he said. "No," I said. "I sheltered a man in the snow. Wind slid under the door like a thin blade." The king stared at me for a long beat, then turned to the other man. "Shift. No. Then we're done speaking." He moved too quickly for me to follow. One moment air, the next iron. His hand closed around his brother's throat and slammed him into the cabin's beam. The entire structure shuddered. The fire spat. My body flinched before my mind caught up, before reason could say stay out, and I threw myself forward. "Stop." The king's head snapped toward me. The hand at his brother's throat loosened an inch. His voice, when it came, was almost bewildered. "You would put yourself between us. Because this isn't justice. It's theater." He blinked once, slow. It was the first time he seemed Uncertain. His brother coughed, sliding to his feet. Always did prefer drama, he rasped. Makes the blood easier to scrub. I bit back a shocked laugh. The king's gaze cut to him and the humor died in the air. Explain, I said, before the room could tilt toward violence again. Both of you. Now. They stared at each other a long time. Two mirrors with different ghosts. Then the brother spoke, raw and unadorned. He ordered an extermination, he said, not bothering to glance at the king. A village accused of harboring rogues. I remembered the winter 2 years ago when the moon went black for 3 nights and smoke inked the sky at dawn. I'd thought it was a storm. Storms don't scream. There were no warriors. The brother went on. Children, elders, an old woman who blessed me with a crust of bread and a laugh. His voice broke on the memory like a ship on rock. I refused the command. I drew steel on my own patrol and ferried them north instead. Silence pushed against the windows. I looked at the king. And you? His eyes did not waver from mine. I ordered a cleansing, he said, of a known nest that had slaughtered my scouts and raided my borders. We had reports. I have graves. His brother's jaw hardened. You had fear. The crown has survivors, the king bit out. And ghosts, the brother said. The ache in my chest swelled. Old questions remapped themselves into a single line. 2 men standing on either side of a river named Mercy, both drowning, both insisting the other had put them there. Why did you run then? I asked the brother. To stop the next order before he gave it. And why chase him? I asked the king, he didn't answer. Or maybe he did, but only with the blade of his stare. Because blood that defies you becomes example, the brother supplied. Bitter. Kill me and the kingdom learns. Spare me and the crown looks weak. The king finally spoke, voice low. Spare you and the crown fractures. A sharp hiss of air leaked out of me. I don't know your wars, I said, but I know what it means to lose a home. I know what it means to be punished for surviving it. My throat burned. You won't ruin what little I've made. Rowan, the king said, and I hated how my name softened him. You were banished, why? Because I didn't bow quiet enough and I didn't break pretty enough. I lifted my chin. Because I knew how to stitch and they preferred how I screamed. His pupils flared. The urge to reach for me moved through him so strongly I felt it like a warm hand on the air. He didn't. He locked his fingers around restraint and squeezed. 3 days, he murmured. I hunted 3 days through a country of ice and found... You found him, I said. I was an accident. No, he said, so certain the room had to rearrange around it. There are no accidents with the moon. The floor creaked. The brother shifted weight, testing his ribs. Enough fate talk, he muttered. Pick your sentence, king. Take me back in chains, kill me where I stand or go. But you will not touch her. Be careful, the king said softly. How often you command me in my own shadow. Be careful, I shot back, surprising myself. How quickly you lose the only man who still loves you enough to challenge you. Both of them looked at me. It felt like standing at the tip of a blade, terrifying, dizzying, and honest. Something flared in the king's gaze, hurt so old it had grown teeth. He turned slightly, enough to set his back at an angle, as if to carry weight more quietly. I don't love easily, he said, each word too measured to be false. I can tell, I said. He almost smiled. It looked like a wound learning to heal. Outside, a horn cut the air short. The king's head tilted. His soldiers, the sound rolled once, twice, different pulses. A warning rhythm. Scouts, the brother said, eyes narrowing. Not yours. The king was movement before the sentence ended, sliding to the door and cracking it with 2 fingers. Cold knifed through. The pines across the creek breathed wrong. A shadow detached from the dark and shifted. Not wolf. Not man rogues, of course, the brother said, grim. Noise gathers carrion. The king shut the door, spine settling into something lethal. We're leaving. All of us. No, I said. It isn't safe, he cut in. They can smell your kindness from the border. He gestured at the hearth, the blankets, the herbs. You don't belong where hunger writes laws. I don't belong anywhere, I said. And it was only when the words were out that I heard the truth in them. and wanted to stuff them back down my throat. He looked at me like a vow. "You belong to yourself," he said. And a pause, a fracture across his mouth. "To me, don't," I whispered. "Don't make this harder." "It's not a choice," he answered, wrecked and sure. "It's a consequence." The horn sounded again, closer now, agitated. The brother had already crossed the room, retrieving the blade from beneath my bed as if it had always been his. He glanced at me once, the look impossibly gentle. "You have boots?" he asked. I nodded numbly. "Put them on," he said. "And wrap your wrists. These woods bite." "You're not taking her into a fight," the king snapped. "I'm taking her out of one," his brother said. "Your soldiers can't hold two fronts and you know it." The king's jaw locked, calculation sliding like a shadow behind his eyes. He strode to the hearth, grabbed my old fur cloak, and, with a motion that should have belonged to a different man, a quieter life, shook it out and swung it over my shoulders, pulling it close at the throat. His fingers brushed my skin. Heat sparked up my neck like a fuse. "Stay behind me," he said, soft as a bruise. "If you run, I'll catch you. If you fall, I'll carry you. And if I refuse?" I asked, breath stuttering. He bent, just enough to bring his mouth near my ear. "Then I will spend the rest of my life learning how to convince you." It was the most terrifying thing anyone had ever promised me. It sounded like prayer. The door shuddered in its frame, a body thrown against it from outside. The brother spun, blade ready. The king's power surged, invisible and suffocating, and the latch slid back under his hand. Snow exploded inward. A rogue lunged, eyes wild, ribs showing like cage slats, and slammed against the threshold. The king's arm moved like nightfall. Steel flashed. Silence swallowed the snarl mid-breath. The rogue folded, sliding bonelessly into the drift. I didn't realize I'd reached for the king's wrist until I felt tendon under my fingers, warm and furious. He looked down at my hand, then up at me. "Behind me," he repeated. I nodded once. He shifted forward out into the white. The brother took the rear, watchful and angry and somehow still alive. I stepped between them, the safest place I'd ever known. The world outside had changed. The storm had steeped the forest in hush, the kind of hush that prophecies understand. Shapes moved along the tree line, thin, hungry, led by no one. Rogue packs were desperation braided to teeth. They had no flags, no names. They had only winter. 2 flanks, the brother murmured. "West and north." "I'll take west," the king said. "You hold north. And her?" "Between." He cut me a sideways glance. "Until I can build walls around her name." I wanted to tell him not to. I wanted to say I had no use for walls, that I'd lived more freely in a cabin the size of a heartbeat than I ever had behind pack gates. But the rogue slid from the pines like sickness, and words were a luxury for safer mornings. The first wave came fast. 4 bodies, wrong-footed by hunger and hopeful for easy meat. The king met them without sound, a dark arc of motion and inevitability. His brother held the north line, blade singing low, economy and grief in every stroke. I had no weapon but stubbornness. I used it. I grabbed a fallen branch, thick as my forearm, and when a scrawny rogue broke from the west and darted low, too low for the king to catch without opening his side, I stepped forward and cracked the branch across its muzzle. Bone crunched. Blood sprayed. It reeled, then lunged again, and I jammed the splintered end into the soft part under its jaw, the way the old healer once taught me to stop spring wolves from tearing the goats. It dropped at my feet. I stood there shaking, the stick a miracle in my fist. The king had already turned, eyes blown wide, attention slamming over me like a wall. I said, "Behind you," I finished, voice wrecked and triumphant and terrified. I was. Something like astonishment broke across his face, quick as lightning, gone again. The fight didn't last long. Hunger fights hard. Purpose wins. The rogues scattered, noses full of crown and consequence. The forest exhaled, wind easing back into trees. The king wiped his blade clean in the snow. The brother leaned briefly against a pine and caught his breath the way men do who have carried too much too far. I realized I was still holding the branch death grip tight and let it fall. My hands were shaking. Blood, rogue blood, spattered my wrists. It looked wrong there. It looked honest. The king reached for me, then stopped as if the distance were a cliff only I could bridge. He lowered his hand. "You did well." "I did what I had to," I said. "That's all well ever is," he murmured. The brother pushed off the tree, scanning the east. "We need to move." "To where?" I asked. "South," the king said. "To the keep." "No." The word was out of my mouth before I could chew it. The thought of stone and ceremony, the weight of eyes, the scent of power tightening around my throat. I couldn't breathe. He read it all on my face with a skill that made me dizzy. "Not to parade you," he said gently. "To protect you. Protect me from what?" "Fate," my laugh was thin. "Your crown?" "From anyone who will use you to break me," he said, soft and terrible. "Which is everyone." Snow drifted between us like ash. We stood in it, 3 bodies cut into the same cold world by different knives, until the brother, pragmatic as hunger, said, "We can argue and freeze, or we can survive and fight later. Pick." The king did not look away from me. "Come," a pause. "Please." The last word sounded like it had cost him something important. It shouldn't have mattered. It did. I turned once, just once, to look at the cabin. The crooked roofline, the window with the crack that let in spring peepers, the hearth that smelled of juniper and salt. I had built a life small enough to fit inside my ribs. It had held me because nothing else would. "Wait," I said, and slipped inside. The fire was low. I moved quickly, blanket, herbs, the little tin box of needles and gut thread. I hesitated, then crossed to the wall and pried up a floorboard. From the hollow there, I took a tiny cloth bundle. It was nothing, worthless to anyone else. To me, it was proof I'd existed when the world tried to erase me. A button from a dress too worn to repair. A lock of hair. A prayer note written in the old hand of a woman who'd taught me how to bind wounds and find water. "Live anyway," it said. Ink washed into bruised curves by tears. I tucked the bundle into my cloak. When I stepped back outside, the king's eyes flicked to the lump it made at my breastbone, then up to my face. He didn't ask. He only offered his hand. I didn't take it. But I walked beside him when we left my last safe place to the winter. And sometimes that's the only kind of courage you can afford. We moved south through the trees, silent, swift, the brother ranging out, the king at my shoulder like a shadow I could trust and not trust in the same breath. The sky bruised purple, then black. The cold sharpened. Somewhere far to the east, a wolf howled, and another answered. And in the space between those sounds, something ancient uncoiled in me, something that recognized the rhythm in his stride and the tempo in my pulse and called it by a name I refused to say. We crested a ridge. Below, the land fell into a bowl of dark and river and stone. Far off, like a low constellation, the keep burned with lamplight. The king stopped. He looked at me as if that view were a choice I should be allowed to make. "Rowan," he said, almost a question. "Just don't cage me," I said. A fault line cut through his mouth, pain and promise. "The only cage you'll ever know is me trying to keep you breathing." "That's not better," I whispered. "It's just gentler," he swallowed. "Then I will learn gentler until you can't tell the difference." Behind us, a twig snapped. The brother reappeared, breath fogging. "Scouts on the East Road," he said. "Not rogues, not crown." "Then who?" the king asked. The brother's eyes met mine. There was a story there I hadn't been told. "Hunters," he said. "The kind paid by names you won't find on paper." "For you?" I asked. "For us now," he answered. "Congratulations, little healer. You've been promoted to liability." The king's face went iron. "We run." We did. Down the ridge, through the trees, across a creek thin with ice. The keep lights didn't get closer so much as larger, as if we were entering a star. My lungs burned. My legs shook. The brother's steps grew ragged, the wound I'd stitched tugging like a toddler at a mother's skirt. I grabbed his elbow once, hauling him up a ledge. He gave me a look full of gratitude and annoyance and something like pride. 5 more minutes, he said. I promise to collapse dramatically once we're safe." The king glanced back, exasperation and worry fighting in his eyes. "If you die before we get home, I'm resurrecting you so I can kill you myself." "That's family," the brother muttered. I almost smiled. We broke the tree line, and the keep finally towered, walls rising like night cliffs, banners heavy with frost, torches carving gold out of stone. Soldiers lined the inner bailey. The gate yawned open as we approached, and for the first time since the king had stepped into my life like a verdict, I saw his face ease, not soften. Ease, the difference between battle and the breath after. "Open," he called. The gate did, groaning like old teeth. We stepped through, and the world shifted. Sounds changed, air warmed by fires and kitchens slid over my skin. Eyes lifted, guards, servants, a stable boy with straw in his hair, and each gaze landed on the king, then on me. Surprise, calculation. Curiosity's sharp teeth. "Later," he murmured, voice for me alone. "You can hate me later." "Count on it," I said. "Good." He almost smiled again. Hate keeps us honest. We crossed the yard. The brother stumbled once, and I caught him. He leaned into me a heartbeat longer than he needed to, then straightened. And for the first time, I realized how young he looked without anger. Like a boy who'd been handed a crown-shaped wound and told to wear it around his heart. At the great doors, a woman waited. She had a commander's spine and a healer's eyes, gray hair twisted into a knot that didn't know how to loosen. Her gaze took in the king, the brother, the blood on my wrists, and filed each away like a ledger. "Majesty," she said. "Marshal," the king returned. "Quiet the hall. We bring no spoils, only storms." Her eyes flicked to me. "And this storm's name?" "Rowan," the king said before I could speak. His voice did a strange thing on that one word, and the marshal's mouth thinned with a different sort of knowledge. "Very well," she said. "East Gallery. I'll post the wardens. Shall I send for the matriarch?" The king's jaw tightened. "No," the brother coughed. "Yes," he said. "Send her." He looked at me, apology and determination braided. "If anyone knows what Rowan is besides Omega, it's our grandmother." I stared at them both. "What I am?" The marshal's gaze softened. "There are scent lines that wake once in a generation, child. Threads that tie crowns to winters. Names lost because power fears memory." She nodded to the brother's side. "And stitches that tell me you don't faint at the sight of blood. Good. You'll need both." The king's hand hovered an inch from my back, guiding without touching, claiming without closing. I let myself be steered into stone warmth and lamplight, and the hum of a keep whose bones remembered war like a lullaby. I didn't look back at the gates. I didn't look forward at the throne. I looked only at the space between the two, where a life might be built that didn't require me to disappear to survive. As the doors swung shut behind us and the keep swallowed the night, I felt it. The thread tightening, the story bending. Whatever I had been before the king crossed my threshold, it was ending. Whatever I would be after, it was beginning. And somewhere deep under the stone, where water runs black and old laws sleep, the moon turned its face and listened. The keep was too quiet. Not the kind of silence that comforts, but the kind that waits. Every echo of my footsteps sounded too loud, too human, too foreign against stone that had never belonged to me. The walls were carved with old sigils. Wolf, crests intertwined with moons, bloodlines burned into history. And yet, as I walked through them beside the Alpha King, I couldn't shake the feeling that those sigils knew me, that they were whispering something I wasn't ready to hear. The air inside was warm, heavy with smoke and iron. My fingers brushed, the fur collar at my throat where his hand had fastened it hours ago. I hadn't taken it off. Not because of comfort, but because every time I tried, it felt wrong. like peeling off my own skin. And the worst part? His scent clung to it. Dark pine and storm rain. The kind of scent that could ruin a woman if she let it linger too long. The Alpha King walked ahead of me through the corridor. Shoulders broad, posture regal, every step measured like a man who'd forgotten what it meant to stumble. His brother followed a few paces behind, silent but watchful. I could feel his eyes on me sometimes, checking for fear, for resentment. Maybe guilt. The soldiers we passed lowered their heads, their fists over hearts. They barely looked at him, but when they did, I saw it. The flicker of awe and dread that came with loyalty forced by bloodline. When their eyes slid to me, though, it was different. Curiosity, judgment, a hint of something else. Something primal, because they could smell it too. The faint trace of his scent on my skin, an omega touched by an alpha's mark, though no mark had yet been given. Not yet. He stopped in front of a tall, iron-banded door at the end of the corridor. "Here," he said, voice low, controlled. "You'll stay here tonight." The room beyond was spacious, too spacious. A bed large enough for 3, furs spread thick across it. A fire already lit, curtains drawn tight against the windows. I turned toward him, searching for words, but my throat felt full of smoke. "You could have left me in the barracks." He met my gaze, unreadable. "No." "Why?" His jaw tightened. "Because the barracks are filled with men who've gone months without the sight of a woman, and because I would kill them if they looked at you the way they already look." A chill rippled through me. "That's not your decision to make." He took a step closer, his shadow swallowing mine. It became my decision the moment fate decided to curse us both. My breath hitched. "I'm not your mate." He smiled then, but there was no warmth in it. Only pain. "You can deny the bond all you want, little wolf, but your scent already betrayed you." I turned away, gripping the edge of the table near the fire. "You think you can keep me here like some possession?" "I think," he said, stepping closer, "that if I don't, my kingdom will tear you apart before dawn." I looked back at him then, the words dying on my tongue. There was truth in his eyes, dark and brutal. He wasn't threatening me. He was warning me, and that was worse. His brother's voice broke the tension. "She deserves to know the rest." The king didn't move. "Not yet." "Now," the brother snapped. "You can't keep her blind and call it protection." Something passed between them, an entire conversation in silence. Then the king exhaled through his teeth and nodded. "Fine." He turned to me, eyes like a storm that had finally decided where to break. "The night I scented you," he said quietly, "the bond awakened something in me that shouldn't exist anymore." I frowned. "What do you mean?" He walked closer, slow, deliberate. "The mark you carry." His gaze flicked to my neck, and my pulse stumbled. "It isn't new. It's older than you. Older than me. It's the mark of the silver line." The brother stepped forward. "A bloodline erased a century ago. Half omegas, half seers. They could sense moonlight before it rose." I stared between them, shaking my head. "That's a myth. My mother, she wasn't..." The king's eyes softened. "Your mother wasn't who you think she was." I backed away, the wall hitting my shoulders. "Stop." "She hid you in the outer territories," his brother continued. "Away from court, away from the scent of power. She must have known what you were." "Stop," I whispered again. But the king's voice followed, low and unrelenting. "When I scented you, it wasn't just bond. It was blood recognizing blood." My stomach turned cold. "You're lying." He shook his head slowly. I wish I were. For a long time I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. The world felt like it was folding in on itself. Silver line. The cursed lineage that could bind kings and ruin empires. If that was true, what happens now? I whispered. He didn't answer right away. When he finally did, his voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. Now they'll come for you. Who? Every faction that's ever wanted the crown. He looked at the door, jaw hardening. And every wolf who wants to break me through you. His brother stepped forward. Then tell her about the mark. The king's eyes found mine again. When the bond awakened, it burned something into me. He turned his wrist, and I saw it. A faint shimmer beneath the skin, like a crescent moon carved in light. It appeared the moment I scented you, he said. The old magic of our kind, the one I thought was dead, has chosen. I looked down at my hands, trembling. What are you saying? He closed the space between us. You bear half of that mark hidden beneath your skin, and if we're apart too long, it will start to burn. I laughed then, a sound cracked and hollow. You're insane. I wish that were true, he said. But you'll feel it soon. The pull, the ache, the bond trying to complete itself. I pushed past him, toward the fire. My reflection in the glass shimmered. Eyes too bright, lips trembling. This can't be happening, I whispered. I never asked for this. No one does, he said quietly. Then break it. His voice darkened. You think I haven't tried? The silence that followed was deafening. I turned to see his hands clenched at his sides, veins raised under the skin, a faint glow pulsing at his wrist where the mark burned faintly silver. When I tried to sever it, he said, voice low. It nearly killed me. My heart stopped. What? The bond doesn't want to die, his brother said quietly. It wants to own. I didn't realize I was crying until the heat from the fire blurred into the salt on my cheeks. The king took a slow step toward me. Rowan, don't, I said, voice breaking. Don't say my name like that. Like what? Like you care. His expression flickered. Something raw, unguarded. I never wanted this, he said. You think I wanted to scent you and feel my entire world shift? You think I wanted the bond to chain you to me? He stopped inches away, his voice falling to a whisper. But I can't undo it. The firelight painted his face in gold and shadow. I could see the war behind his eyes, the alpha and the man, both losing, and God's help me, a part of me wanted to reach out, to touch the mark on his wrist, to see if it matched the strange warmth blooming beneath my own skin. Because he was right. I could feel it now, the faint pull under my ribs, the soft, painful tether between our breaths. Do you feel it? He asked, voice hoarse. I nodded once, unable to lie, his hand lifted, slow, hesitant, stopping just short of my jaw. Then you understand why I can't let you go. The door slammed open before I could answer. The marshal, gray-haired, iron-spined, stood in the doorway, breath quick, eyes sharp. Majesty, she said, bowing, the council demands your presence. There's unrest in the southern gate. The king didn't turn. Handle it. She hesitated, her gaze flicking between us. It concerns her. My stomach twisted. Me? The marshal's voice was grave. Word has spread of a woman who carries the old blood. The court whispers that the king has found his fated. And the nobles want proof. The king's expression went cold. Proof? They demand the bond be sealed before the moon's rise, or they will call it treason. The silence that followed was colder than any winter. He turned toward me slowly, the glow from the fire catching on the mark at his wrist. His eyes were unreadable, but I could feel the storm beneath them. They want you marked, he said quietly. Tonight, I stumbled back. No. If I refuse, he said, voice low, they'll come for you. They'll tear you apart to see if your blood shines silver. Then let them. He took a step forward. Don't test me, Rowan. My voice trembled, but I didn't back down. I won't be branded to save your throne. His jaw tightened. It's not my throne I'm trying to save. Then what? He exhaled, broken. You, the brother stepped forward, voice cutting through the tension. There's another way. The king turned, hope flickering in his eyes. What? His brother looked at me. If her mark awakens on its own, it seals the bond without ceremony. No court, no witnesses. The king's eyes snapped to mine. When? When the moon finds her, the brother said. And when she stops fighting what she is. The king's voice was almost a whisper. Then may the moon rise soon. That night I couldn't sleep. The mark beneath my skin burned softly, like a secret candle flickering just below the surface. And somewhere in the keep, I could feel him awake too, pacing, fighting, wanting, two souls tied by fate and defiance, caught between duty and desire, one trying to protect, the other trying not to feel. But as the first light of dawn slipped across the window, I knew the truth I didn't want to admit. The mark wasn't just beneath my skin anymore. It was beneath my heart. Before dawn, the keep forgot how to breathe. Courtyards hush differently when they're waiting for blood. The air thinned. The torches guttered like they knew their light might be asked to testify. Somewhere above my borrowed room, a bell tongued once. Not alarm, not ceremony. A warning to wake the walls themselves. The mark under my skin pulsed in a rhythm that wasn't mine. I pressed my palm to my sternum and felt it answer a heartbeat farther down the corridor. Steady. Iron, relentless. His. The Alpha King paced a world away, and still his body tugged at mine like a moon dragging a tide. I hated that it steadied me. I hated more that I wanted it. Footsteps scuffed outside my door. Not soldiers, light, quick, purposeful. When the latch eased, I already had the fire poker in my hand, the iron weight familiar in my grip from winters spent fending off hunger with bad tools. The door opened a handspan. A whisper slipped through. Rowan, the marshal. I lowered the poker. She slid inside, shut the door behind her, and leaned into the wood a breath longer than a commander should. Gray hair coiled like rope, eyes that had counted too many names. On your feet, child, she said. We walk quietly or not at all. What happened? Politics dressed itself as piety, she said. The southern houses arrived with priests, torches, and a new definition of loyalty. They want proof your blood is what rumor says it is, by marking me. And failing that, she said, mouth a thin line, by cutting you to see if the wound glows. The room tilted. Where is he? In the Hall of Deeds, the marshal said, holding a blade to every tongue without drawing it. She studied my face. You won't like what he is out there. I haven't liked anything since the snow, I said. Which way? Not through the main corridors. The old ways. She crossed to the hearth and pressed her palm to the stone 2 bricks up from the mantle's edge. Mortar side. A seam separated, and a narrow door breathed ash. Where does it go? I asked. Everywhere, she said. And nowhere anyone with a crown likes to crawl. We slipped inside. Stone swallowed heat. The marshal's lantern scratched a small circle from the dark, enough to show me steps worn by the kind of feet that carried secrets. I followed. Cloak pulled tight. The poker tucked into my belt because it was a bad weapon, but it was mine. We moved through the keep's ribs, behind walls, under floors, between rooms where voices swelled and fell. Once we paused behind a lattice of old iron as nobles quarreled an arm's length away. One voice syrup-smooth with prayer, another brittle with outrage, both of them drunk on the idea of verdicts they wouldn't have to enforce. The silver line, the priest murmured. Cloth whispered, devotion bowing to its own reflection. Proof binds. Doubt corrodes. Doubt. A lord spat. My men saw the king bring her inside with a cloak around her throat like a claim. My sister's maid says she smelled his scent on the girl's skin. Another voice, softer, more dangerous. Then why hasn't he sealed it? The priest's pause was a smile in the dark. Because a man may rule a kingdom, Lord Carrison, and still fear the one truth he cannot command. The marshal's hand tightened briefly around my wrist. Not comfort, agreement. They will gild their fear and call it faith, her grip said. We left them to their righteousness and climbed. The tunnel exhaled us behind a tapestry big enough to clothe a god. The weave showed a winter hunt, wolves and men braided by teeth and banners, a moon like a coin above. The marshal set her lantern on the floor and hooked 2 fingers into the seam. Ready? I was born ready, I lied. She moved the tapestry. The Hall of Deeds yawned. Vaulted stone, banners heavy as verdicts. A long table groaned under the weight of attention. On one side, southern lords and their sleek wives glittered like a knife rack. On the other, commanders who smelled of snow and iron. At the head, not on a throne but standing like he feared chairs, the king. His eyes found me the way falcons find a pulse. The mark under my skin softened from ache to answer. I wanted to hate it. I wanted to fall into it and sleep. The marshal stepped out first. Conversation snapped. She didn't bow. "Majesty?" she said, crisp, as if the room belonged to her spine. As requested, as if I hadn't crept here through the keep's veins. The lie covered me like a shield. The king's jaw eased 1 degree. "Rowan?" he said, like a fact. I stepped into a room full of people who would translate my breath into law. The southern priest turned. He wore white like winter wears innocence. His eyes were pebble gray. "Child," he said, and somehow made it sound like evidence. "You come to the hall in a king's cloak." "It was cold," I said. The marshal coughed into her fist, and I couldn't tell if it was a warning or a laugh. Lord Carison's ring scraped the table. "We ask only what tradition requires," he said. "When the crown claims bond, the realm requires proof. The crown has claimed nothing," the king said, voice a low steel that remembered heat. Carison's mouth curled. "Then perhaps your majesty will forgive the question. Why is she in your keep?" "Because I brought her here," he said, and my heat answered under my ribs as if the truth were a physical thing. "Bring her to the dais," the priest said softly. "Let the old light test the claim." A murmur lifted like flies from honey. The old light. I'd only heard it whispered in the healer's hut, when the eldest sealed oaths over winter births. A clear bowl, a pinch of salt, a strand of hair. Some bloodlines glowed when the moon looked through them. Fairy tales and failing candles. The king did not move. "There will be no spectacle. The realm requires—" "The realm," the king said, "requires that I keep it standing." He turned his head, not enough to be disrespect, enough that only I could see the slant of his mouth. "Come," he said, not a command, a plea disguised as one. I walked. My boots clicked the stone in a measure I couldn't control. I kept my eyes on his shoulder, on the scar through his brow, on anything except the bowl the priest set on the table and filled with water so clear it looked like a piece of sky. "Your hand," the priest said. I almost laughed. After everything, how simple it was to be reduced to a palm. I held it over the bowl. The king's body leaned a degree toward mine, like instinct could catch me if ritual decided to drown. The priest took a small knife from a chain around his neck. "Too clean, too loved. A cut," he murmured. "A truth." "Use mine," the king said, voice like a door barring a storm. "It must be hers," the priest said, and the room inhaled as one creature. I thought of my mother's note. "Live anyway," I nodded. "Do it," the knife kissed skin. Pain prickled, sharp, bright, intimate. 1 drop fell. 2. The surface of the water trembled and settled, and light, not a blaze. Not spectacle, a pulse, soft as breath, that laced the water with a silver thread. It wasn't brighter than the torches. It wasn't stronger than the room. It just refused to be ignored, like a song you didn't know you knew until your mouth shaped it. A gasp rippled. The priest's eyes flared. Lord Carison's fists clenched around air that had forgotten how to be his. The king did not move. He watched my face instead of the bowl, as if the realm could hang itself, and he would still count only the ways my mouth might fold around grief. The light faded. Silence iced the table. "It is enough," the marshal said, the first to find words. "Enough?" Carison spat. "A whisper in a bowl? We have mages who can what?" the king asked without looking away from me. "Stop the moon from choosing?" The priest's voice softened. "The old law is clear. The bond must be sealed to stabilize the line. Without it..." The doors boomed, not the polite cough of wealth entering, not the measured pound of a messenger. Boom, like something outside had thrown its body against the wood. Once, twice. A soldier shoved them open on the third thud, breath churning, frost in his beard. "Majesty," he barked. "Fire at the east granaries. Smoke at the lower wards." And his eyes flicked to me, then away. Hunters in the alleys. The room's temperature fell. The king moved. I felt the decision in my bones before his voice cut the space. Carrison, take your pious and go put buckets in men's hands. Marshal, North Wall, I want the watch doubled. Seal the family wing. And the girl? Carrison demanded, desperate greed making him stupid. She needs guarding. The king's eyes were winter. She has it. He turned, already calculating. Where is my brother? South Tower, the marshal said. He was persuading 2 mercenaries to share their employer. Good. The king's palm pressed briefly to my back, and everything in me answered like a bird breaking from a snare. With me. I can help, I said, ignoring the way the priest made a sign at my cut like he could bless curiosity from me. I've stopped worse than smoke with 2 strips of linen and a prayer. You'll be more help breathing, he said. Stay behind me. We ran. The keep unfolded as if it had been waiting for this sprint. Stairs, corridors, doors standing open in front of us like mouths that had been told our names. The lower halls seethed. Servants hauling water, children crying, a dog barking because fear makes everyone their smallest size. Heat licked the stone at the east turn. Smoke crawled like a living thing along the ceiling. We burst into the grain court. Fire had found the dry seasonings, chaff, old rope, the wooden ribs of bins that remembered autumn as a lover. Flames wrote language none of us wanted to learn. Men shouted, lines formed, the marshal's voice cut through like function given throat. The king vanished into action. No crown, no ceremony. Buckets moved because his hands did. Orders stuck because his eyes stapled them to bone. I hauled with the rest. Bucket, pass, throw, breath until my arms shook and the world narrowed to heat and rhythm. The mark under my skin burned. Not pain. Attention. A tether in a crowd that kept me from being a single terrified animal. A scream cut the noise. Not fire. Human. A girl's voice, high and sharp and short. The sound of something that broke clean. I ran before I thought. Rowan, the marshal snapped, but she was 3 men and a blaze away. The scream came again from the alley behind the dye vats. Smoke pooled there, thicker, sweeter. The bad sweetness of wet wool and old color cooking. I shoved through it, cloak over my mouth, eyes stinging. The alley kinked left. A shape moved at the corner. Too fast, too thin, wrong. Not wolf, not man. The kind of wrong that's made, not born. Hunters. The girl lay face down in the slush, hair fanned, legs twitching. A man crouched over her with a knife like the priest's, if the priest had married rust. His hand tangled in her hair. Stop, I said, because sometimes stupid is the only language anyone hears. The man turned his head. His eyes were empty pools. He smiled, and it didn't touch anything a person can live in. Look, he said. Another prize. Let her go, I said, forcing calm into my voice. You take me. You die before the gate shuts. You'll fetch more if I carve you wrong, he said pleasantly, and the girl whimpered. I moved. Not fast, right. The poker came free of my belt and knocked the knife from his hand. He blinked, not surprised, not angry. Amused. He reached for me, fingers like iron, and my body remembered the way out of grips you don't escape. Heel down, twist, step inside the arm, strike the throat with the end of the poker the way the healer had taught me to crush spring wolves when they went for kids. He gagged. Surprise finally found his eyes. The knife clattered. He didn't fall. He reached again, and I realized I had misjudged the weight of the world. The alley flashed dark to bright. A shape hit him shoulder first and drove him into the dye house wall so hard the stone coughed dust. The king. His face didn't look like rulership or even rage. It looked like mathematics had discovered a new way to subtract. He hit the hunter once. It was enough. The body slid down the wall like an apology. He turned on me so fast I felt wind. His hands closed around my arms, not bruising, anchoring. You don't run toward screams, he said, voice shaking in a man who doesn't shake. I do, I said, when no one else is there first. His mouth opened and closed around a word that might have been my name if he could breathe it without burning. He looked past me at the girl, still breathing, bleeding under hair. He knelt, checked her throat, his hands competent in ways that had nothing to do with thrones. She'll live, he said. Get the marshal. And don't move, I finished. Because he would try to pick me up and put me somewhere safe, even if safety had to be invented on a map that didn't have it. He looked back at me, and the smoke made his eyes brighter. Stay where I can see you, I nodded. He lifted the girl and stood. She was nothing in his arms. He shifted her weight, and the mark under my skin flared. I understood it then in a new, uglier way. Not only pull, warning. The bond was an instrument tuned to threat. We got the girl to the court. The fire had broken. Smoke sulked. Buckets slowed. People started remembering how to be people. The marshal saw the king and began issuing orders so fast it was like watching a skilled thief return what she'd taken without anyone noticing. Hunters? She asked me, eyes already counting the next problem. 1, I said. Dead. Next time, she said. Shout. Next time, I said. Don't be 3 men and a blaze away. For a heartbeat, I thought she might smile. She didn't. Matriarch is asking, for me? For all of you, she said. She's in the moon chapel. I looked at the king. Sweat had darkened the edges of his hair. Soot smudged his cheekbone like war paint he hadn't earned today but would use anyway. Under the smoke and heat and noise, the mark thrummed. He felt me feel it. Go, he told the marshal. I'll bring them. Her, the marshal corrected dryly. Your brother goes where he shouldn't and arrives when we need him least or most. At present, he is both. We found him on the south wall, breathing hard, knuckles cleaner than the rest of him because blood doesn't stick to men who have already run out of it for the day. He slung an arm around my shoulders before I could duck. I hear you've invented new ways to terrify kings, he said. Save some for me. Walk, the king said. We walked. Through corridors that smelled of wet ash, past faces that ached with saved granaries and almost corpses, into the chapel. The moon chapel was small and older than the keep, a round room with a hole in the ceiling where Sky could look in and decide if we were telling the truth. A shallow pool lay at the center. No icons, no gold, stone and water in the place where attention changes the air. An old woman stood by the pool, hands folded, gray hair unbound. Eyes like winter river water over stones. The room bent around her the way honesty bends around grief, careful, unavoidable. Grandmother, the brothers said together. The matriarch's eyes moved to me. They did not soften or sharpen. They recognized. My breath shook. I didn't know whether to bow or run. Child, she said. Come, I did. The pool smelled faintly of iron and rain. Give me your hands, she said. Her palms were warm as bread. She turned my wrists over, examined the cut, the lines. When her thumb passed over the place under my skin where the mark sang, she nodded. Yes, she said to no one and everyone. What am I asked. Because sometimes you have to ask a blade what it's called while it's touching you. Born of the silver line, she said. Half omega, half sight, full problem. Her mouth tipped. We thought the line broken. It did what old magic does when it is hunted. It went quiet and learned the shape of survival. My mother, I asked. Clever, the matriarch said. And brave. She hid you in a place that smelled like loss so strongly no one would think to sniff for destiny. The king stood very still, like men do when the next breath might be a vow. How do we protect her? You don't, the matriarch said, as if correcting a child's grip. You listen to her. You put your body where she points, Majesty, and you train your soldiers to stop confusing devotion with usefulness. The brother half laughed, choked on it, made it into a cough. The matriarch turned to me again. Do you feel the burn? I nodded. It will worsen, she said, until you answer it. By sealing the bond, the king said quietly. By choosing, the matriarch corrected, and it shook the room. Sealing is a ritual. Choosing is a will. The realm wants the former. The moon cares only for the latter. How do I choose? I asked. By knowing what you would lose, she said, and losing it anyway. Silence feathered the pool. What would she lose? The brother asked. The matriarch's gaze held mine. Her aloneness, she said. Her small safe world. Her claim that no one ever picked her. She flicked a glance at the king. And her ability to tell herself she does not love a man she has no business saving, heat, climbed my neck like shame that had decided to be honest. The king looked away first. I wanted to hate him for the mercy. I couldn't. A shout bled through the chapel door. The marshal appeared, breath clipped. "Hunters breached the lower crypts," she said. "They know the tunnels. Someone sold them the map. Later," the king said, and the word later sounded like a blade he would keep sheathed only until it could cut clean. "They're moving toward the springs," the marshal continued. "Toward this room." The matriarch did not flinch. "Then the choosing will not be philosophical." The king stepped closer to me. "Not touching. Orbiting." "Rowan," he said. "If they reach you, they will not kill you.
They will take you."
I won't allow it." "I know," I said. "I mean it," he said, quieter. "I would burn my crown and salt its roots." "I know," I repeated, and a terrible calm settled in me like a snow that lets you see farther. "But I won't let you burn for me without me." Footsteps hammered the corridor. The marshal lifted her blade. The brother rolled his shoulders. The king drew in a breath that changed the room. They came like famine, thin, quick, grinning because they had been paid enough to enjoy the possibility of earning it. The first through the door met the marshal's steel and learned about retirement. 2 more slid left, fast as rats, knives bright. The brother took one with an elbow and a prayer. The other got past, low and desperate, straight for me. "Down," the king barked, and I went. Cloak a dark fall, knees aching against stone. The hunter's knife slashed air where my throat had been. He pivoted, clever, and I smashed the heavy brass candlestick into his ear so hard he forgot his knife and his future plans. He sank. I didn't stop. Survival is an ugly language. I spoke it until he stopped twitching. 3 more, then 4. The chapel turned into a diagram of heat and breath, stone and intention. The matriarch stood unmoving by the pool, watching with the impatience of someone who had seen better dances. A hunter broke through. Not toward me, toward her. His blade flashed for the matriarch's throat. The king saw too late. I did not. I pushed off the floor and hit the man at the waist. We both went down. The knife kissed my shoulder and slid. Wet heat. The mark under my skin flared to a white roar, and my body made a sound I had never heard come from my mouth. The king was there. Then, and the world trimmed itself down to his hands on me and the knife clattering and the hunter's last mistake. He rolled me gentle like someone coming upon a fawn hit by a cart. Blood slid warm down my arm. The room still fought on, but it had gone far away. "Rowan," he said. My name wasn't a question. It was a battle plan. "Look at me," I did. The hole in the ceiling held a thin coin of day. His face cut the light. "Listen," he said. "I can stop the bleeding. I can carry you. I can kill everyone between here and a safer room." His voice broke. "I can do none of that if you faint." "I won't," I said. I would have lied if I'd needed to. He stripped his sash, bound my arm with a precision that made prayer look sloppy. The mark under my skin burned like a forge bellows. My vision sparkled at the edges. "It's the bond," the matriarch said over my shoulder without looking. "It hates holes." The king's jaw locked. "I know." He finished the knot, slid his palm to my jaw, and the world fell still. "I need you to breathe with me," he said. "Match me in," he inhaled. I followed. Out. We emptied the air like we were learning how to leave together. The burning eased. Not gone. Bearable. Footsteps receded. The last hunter fell in a sound like a decision. The marshal swore softly. The brother laughed once, then hissed through his teeth because his ribs didn't like joy. "Clear," the marshal reported. The king didn't stand. He watched my mouth like it might invent a word he needed to live. Something rippled through his face. Fear. Gratitude. The knowledge that he could not fix the world into a shape that would not threaten me. "I won't be marked to stop a riot," I whispered, because if I didn't say it now, I'd lose the courage later. "I know," he said. "I didn't bring you to the chapel for that." "Why then?" I asked, throat raw. "So I could ask you in a room where the sky can hear," he said, and the matriarch made a noise like blessing or impatience. "Choose me." "Now?" I choked. "With blood on my hands? Especially now." "I'll lose everything," I said. "You'll lose carefully," he said. "With me." I looked down at my bound arm, at the smear of hunter's blood on my palm, at the pool where the sky looked in and didn't turn away. I thought of my cabin and the crack in the window and the note under the floorboard that told me to live anyway. I thought of a man who would burn his crown if I asked, and a brother who would argue the fire into a better shape. I lifted my good hand and laid my palm over the place on his wrist where the silver mark lived. Heat met heat, light-threaded skin. The bond roared and quieted in the same breath. "I won't be caged," I said, and felt the matriarch watching the word find its bones. "You'll be crowned," he said, and for the first time the word didn't sound like amber. It sounded like a tool. "Not your queen," I said, breath shaking. "My partner," he answered, and the room exhaled something I hadn't known it was holding. The moon slid free of a cloud. A pale oval of daylight fell through the chapel's mouth and found the pool. Silver kindled, soft as mercy. It climbed the surface in a spiral and touched our joined skin. Warmth curled under my ribs like a yes that didn't belong to anyone else's language. The matriarch sighed. "There," she said, as if a troublesome hinge had finally taken oil. "Now the realm can want whatever it wants. The old law already has its share. Is it sealed?" I asked. "Not in the way priests like," she said. "Better." Outside, bells began to ring. Not alarm now. The complicated music of a keep that had not burned, of granaries that would make it through winter, of a city that would wake tomorrow to rumors it would mangle and a truth it would not kill. The king helped me to my feet. He did not kiss me. He didn't need to. The mark under my skin lay quiet as a cat deciding perhaps it was home. "Rest," the marshal ordered. "All of you. We'll count our dead and our traitors after soup." The brother slung an arm around my shoulders again, gentler. "You always pick the exciting days," he murmured. "I didn't pick anything," I said. He tipped his head toward the king's wrist, toward mine. "Could have fooled the moon." We turned toward the door. It opened before we reached it. Lord Carrison stood there like a man who'd followed the smell of his own ruin. The priest hovered at his shoulder, eyes wide with something that might have been awe if it weren't so busy trying to reckon with losing. Carrison's gaze fell to our joined hands, to the way the silver thread pulsed and quieted like a small, satisfied animal under skin. His face rearranged itself into caution. "Majesty," he said, "there is talk in the outer ward." "There is always talk," the king said. "Today it will be about how the East granaries still stand." "And the girl?" Carrison asked, with a poor man's attempt at grace. "What is she?" The king looked at me, not him. "Mine," he said. And before Carrison could turn the word into a chain, he added, "Because she chose." We stepped past him into the corridor, the keep suddenly too small for the next thing we had to do. And I knew, like storms know the edges of roofs, that the hardest door was still ahead. The throne room waited, and the throne works differently on every spine. The throne room wasn't built for warmth. It was built for judgment. The air shimmered faintly from torchlight, though no heat reached the heart of the chamber. The walls rose like cliffs carved by a god who preferred obedience to mercy. Every step I took echoed, swallowed, and echoed again, a rhythm that sounded suspiciously like fear. At the far end, the throne itself waited, carved from obsidian and silver, its back shaped like a crescent moon pierced by fangs. It wasn't a seat. It was a weapon pretending to be one. The Alpha King stood before it, his cloak discarded, the weight of command sitting on his shoulders heavier than any crown. His hands were still stained with ash from the fire, his jaw set in a way that told me he'd already made one decision too many. I followed him into the room because the bond tugged me like a tether woven out of defiance and something crueler. Longing. He didn't look at me at first. "You should be resting." I couldn't. Because of the wound? Because of everything. The throne loomed between us, a black horizon cutting the room in half. I stopped at the edge of the dais. "You never sit on it." He turned then, a small, humorless smile ghosting across his lips. "It doesn't feel like mine anymore." "Then why keep it?" "Because if I burn it," he said quietly, "someone else will build a worse one." His words landed heavy. I looked up at the throne again and saw the faint scratches along its arms, claw marks. Not decoration, history. "How many before you sat there?" I asked. "Enough to forget what it meant to rule," he said, and too few who remembered how to be human doing it. His brother's voice echoed faintly from behind a column, low and weary. Then maybe it's time to stop pretending the throne keeps anyone alive. He stepped forward from the shadows, bruised and bandaged, but still upright. His gaze slid to me and softened for half a heartbeat before returning to his brother. The hunters were just the beginning. Someone's paying them to keep coming. I know, the king said. Then why aren't you preparing the court? Because if I tell them the truth, they'll turn on her before the enemy ever reaches our gates. His brother's jaw clenched. And if you don't? Then they'll turn on me. The silence that followed was the kind that carved futures. I couldn't stand it anymore. So that's what this is about? Politics and control? The king's head snapped toward me. This is about survival. Whose? I asked. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Because I could see it now. The cracks beneath his calm, the exhaustion behind every choice. The king was a man standing in the middle of a battlefield trying to hold back every blade with his bare hands. But I was tired too. Tired of being the weapon no one asked to wield. I took a step closer, my voice low but steady. You think binding me will protect me? It won't. You think keeping me close will save me? It won't. All it will do is make me a mirror for your guilt. His eyes flashed gold, the wolf flickering beneath his skin. You think I wanted this bond? I think you're too afraid of it to admit that you did. The air between us snapped like a string, pulled too tight, his brother muttered. Something that sounded suspiciously like saints. Save us both and slipped out the door. Now it was just the two of us, the king and the Omega, who dared to defy him. You don't understand, he said finally. Every king of our bloodline who's carried a bond like this has lost everything because of it. Kingdoms burn, empires collapse. The mark isn't a blessing, it's a sentence. Then let it end with you. His head tilted. You'd rather see me broken? I'd rather see you free. He laughed, but it wasn't cruel. It was tired. Freedom isn't for people like us. You don't get to decide that. He looked at me then, really looked, and something shifted in his expression, like he was seeing a future he hadn't dared to hope for. You talk like a queen. I shook my head. No. I talk like a woman who refuses to be ruled. He stepped closer, closing the distance until the throne's shadow wrapped around us both. His voice was softer now, the storm giving way to confession. The night you pulled me from the snow, I thought death had found me. You were a warmth I didn't deserve. And 3 days later, I said quietly, you came to take that warmth back. He flinched. I came to make sure no one else could use it against me. Then why haven't you? He exhaled, slow, rough, because I fell in love with the fire instead. The words hung in the air like a promise and a curse in one breath. I should have turned away. I should have broken the bond with will alone, walked back into the world before it swallowed me whole. But I didn't. Because love, when it's bound in blood and destiny, doesn't ask for permission. It devours. And I was already burning. The first light of morning began to crawl through the high windows, spilling over the throne's edges, painting us both in silver. Look, I whispered. The moon's gone. He followed my gaze. And yet it still owns us. I took his hand, the bond humming quietly between our skin. Then maybe we stop letting it. His fingers tightened around mine. You mean leave? Yes. Abandon the keep? The crown? Everything? I nodded. You said freedom isn't for people like us. Maybe we prove you wrong. He stared at me for a long, unbearable moment. Then had slowly, a smile found its way through the storm. You realize, he said softly, if I walk away, this kingdom will call me a traitor. Then we'll both be traitors. He stepped closer until his forehead rested against mine. His breath trembled. They'll come after us. I know. They'll never stop. Neither will we. His lips brushed mine then. Not hungry, not desperate. Just certain. The kind of kiss that writes the ending of one world and the beginning of another. When he pulled away, the mark beneath our skin blazed, silver and alive, and I felt it finally settle, not as a chain, but as a choice. For the first time since I found him dying in the snow, there was peace in his eyes. "Then it's done," he said. "No," I whispered, smiling through the ache in my chest. "It's just beginning." We left the throne room together. Behind us, the firelight dimmed, and the moonlight caught the obsidian seat one last time. 2 claw marks gleamed faintly on its arms, old and new, side by side, one from the kings who came before him, and one from the woman who refused to kneel. Outside, the snow began to fall again, soft, slow, unafraid. And for the first time, I didn't feel cold.